This is the data workshop coming at you after a year and a half of inactivity, and I'm starting to get on this to play Broken Arrow. I want to test out the engine, and so that's what I'm doing right now, checking out the game in its trying to stress test the system. This is a custom scenario that somebody in the community, and his name escapes me at the moment, but basically I want to see how the system handles large amounts of units, and I'd figure I'll just run this thing to see how it looks like and provide some commentary. So far, it's clearly a little clippy. There's some runtime issues here, or some frame rate issues at least. Now, I don't know exactly how many units there are on screen, but there's probably not as much as I've gotten in something like Warno thus far, and so you know, it's clearing up a bit now, but this is literally day 2, so they could definitely optimize it. As for the graphics, they're not bad, but I still think Warno is significantly better, and I have everything here on max, or ultra, or high and ultra. There's no max, but this game, it's running on one of my newer boxes, and that has a 5090 and a 13900, 3900K Intel processor. This specific thing lives on an NVMe drive. Oh, I like to see the helicopters here, and you see that the helicopters, they're all just sort of clipping each other. That's something that early on Warno was able to master. And if you look at some of my older recordings, they focused a lot on having no collision, or like collision minimizing unit, group unit movements, and that's just not. That's not clearly something that they've worked on here. That's probably something maybe they'll work on later, or maybe that's something that's an issue with the Unity engine. I'm not sure. I've played Regiments, the other sort of late Cold War era game, although this technically is modern times, but nothing I see here is, other than the unit types, are necessarily modern warfare, especially now that we've seen how drones interact on the battlefield. This looks just like late industrial era warfare, or at least what people might have conceived of it to be. But anyways, the unit behavior, at least with respect to helicopters, is not that good. Now let's see if there's anything else. I'm not really in control of this battle. I mean, this it's hard to tell because but so far even the damage models don't look as good right now, at least from what I can tell. Like in the damage models for armor, for instance. Let me see if we can catch one of these T-90s about to die. I mean, it's hard to tell, but like for instance, used to, or not used to, but if you pay attention to Warno, you were to zoom in during one of the tank engagements, or really any engagement that had armor, you'll see like armor, getting the sort of like the auxiliary external armor started to, you can see them like fall off or like get reflected out from ordnance, hitting it. It just looks a lot better, and you can see some of that in my replays. One thing I will say, definitely the tracer game. What I mean by that is the missile tracers don't look as compelling to Warno, I don't think. And that might just be a stylistic thing. But in Warno, for instance, when you had like large sort of force-on-force engagements that had air, and you see these jets start to maneuver, you'll see kind of really spectacular, very, we'll say, curvilinear tracers. These are mostly parabolas. Now that might be realistic. I'm not an expert in modern ordnance. It sure would make more sense for you to have as simple trajectory as possible, because your aim is to obviously obliterate the enemy and not to dazzle them with a light show here. But the infantry unit models, I think, one thing I like about this is that I haven't played Warno for about a year now, but you just notice, for instance, the Russian infantry over there, they were crawling on their belly. That's something that I don't think that Warno actually simulates. If I remember, Warno infantry usually just runs or they crouch, and there was literally nothing sort of in between, and that didn't sit well with me. And of course, these are just animations, but yeah, so far, it's hard for me to criticize it too much, because this is literally day 2. Then again, the first match I had with Warno, you can look back that on my catalog. That was maybe December 2021. It's quite a while ago. It was right before the Russian-Ukraine war. Actually, it feels like a lifetime ago, but still, that early beta, I guess it was a beta, was much cleaner than this. Now, of course, Eugen is a much more experienced publishing house, right? They had built not only the war games titles, but they also had Ruse, and they had a whole bunch of other sorts of experiences with AAA, well, not AAA, but maybe sort of like indie software projects. This, I think, this Broken Arrow is literally the first game of this team, at least this team together. So in that respect, I think this is a tremendous accomplishment for a totally independent shop. Some of it's hard to tell what of this performance is bounded by the engine versus sort of like design elements or software architectures that the team had implemented. That's all opaque to me, obviously, and it's opaque to most gamers, I'm sure. I hope that they're able to optimize this. Now, I know that I've read in forums that people can, the game developers themselves have conceived of Broken Arrow to be a smaller game, and that makes sense, right? Because when you're trying to position your product, and I think Broken Arrow was announced like a year or two after Warno, maybe they might be contemporaries. I'm not sure, but when you have this sort of situation and you have a competitor, and then Regiments was announced like maybe a year later. And there was actually another game called Cold War game, which I don't think ever made it. I have the demo of it. I actually paid for a demo on this platform, Steam, but it was never released, unfortunately. So I just sort of like maybe I'll take a recording of that. But so you can imagine. The point is, you can imagine that the publishing house or the developers they wanted to try to differentiate their product. Time will tell. This is of the maybe three main real-time tactical games. It's the only one that takes place fully in the modern era, but that's also a risk because we don't really know what sort of the modern war will look like. We've been watching the news, see how drones and things like that have changed. The composure of armies, and the way that they're orchestrating themselves on the field. So that might be like a bridge too far to see if they can actually try to simulate that. But for a game that is roughly maybe competitive with Warno, I think that this is. I would probably say it's currently in third place, only because um, it's not as polished as Regiments, but I think it probably has just because the team is large, they surely have um, the ability to take the reins of second. And who knows, if this engine, if Unity does allow them to scale it up, I think they have the kinds of maps that have the potential for a larger engagement. Although now that I see this map, and this might not be the largest map they can build. It's not, it is large, but it's, it's. Well, we'll have to see. This is an urban environment, so I'm not sure, but my impressions are a little different from what I saw in the trailer. Right. So in the trailer, that was a full cinematic trailer, and one thing that I am sort of disappointed in, and I'm sure others in the community are, is that the game did not ship with a working cinematic replay or even any kind of game replay mode. Um, the skirmish does not, from what I can tell, have a fully functioning AI skirmish. It's mostly, you can have AI bots, but you can't play entirely with an AI. I believe you have to have humans. Um, there's no map editor, and I don't know if they plan on having a map editor. That's something that Eugen Systems sort of happily gave us, or started to give us about a year or so ago. And I think people are starting to build their own maps now, which is good. And that also includes unit editors. Now, there's a scenario editor here, but I'm expecting this team to be able to flesh that out. I remember in the original trailer, there were things that were hinted at, like a camera that's in the HUD, right? Of like you could actually go into the HUD of the jet, or you could have a tank view or follow the infantry, and none of that is, from what I can tell, in this build. So I'm expecting that to be released eventually. I don't know what the developers have stated on that. So I can't really give my full review at this moment. My impressions are it's different from what I was expecting based off of the trailer, but that's the case for almost every game, right? Um, I think that I really hope that they allow for more modability of the game. Um, and I really hope that they fix some of these things, like what I call the physics of the battle, like the unit movements, collision mechanics. And I mean, that's a very hard computer science problem, I think. But helicopters shouldn't just be clipping each other. Um, they should move in coordination in squadron with each other, and you see that in again, the earliest builds of Warno had that implemented. So I'm hoping that Broken Arrow is following suit on that as well shortly. But yeah, I mean, this is the first weekend, so I think this is a good start, and I'm expecting a lot of great things from the developers. I read somewhere like a year ago that they're expecting to expand to more nations. I think they're going to think of having the PLA, the Chinese faction, maybe a European Union faction. So, I mean, that would be interesting, right? If they were able to do that. And if they had that with all the features that I had just mentioned, I think this game is very competitive with War No. But maybe it's complementary, because again, War No is strictly late Cold War era. So if they can do that, and now this might be a big bridge too far, but if they can do that, and they can, their engine and their system is extensible enough so that they could make a realistic simulator with modern warfare, which is going to be heavily drone centric, right? And that's something that when they started development of this game, they probably were not thinking drones were going to have that kind of impact that we obviously seeing them have right now. It's sad to say, but there are two actual wars currently being fought. One in Ukraine and one or two in the Middle East at the moment. So, and in both cases, the ability to lift the fog of war to a great extent using drones and other remote sensing devices has clearly made a major impact in the way that you stage units and think of tactics and battle. And so if this game can somehow mimic that, I think then it is a clear differentiator between it and War No. I mean, I don't consider the two sort of competitive. Like, again, I consider these complementary. Really, the only game that might be competitive in a strict sense is probably the other game, the other late Cold War game, Regiments, and even there, the developer has, and that's also an impressive title, by the way, because that's a single person developer. But there, I think they've explicitly made their game much smaller in scale than War No. So even they have started, they developed their title, not trying to compete directly. And of course, that's sound business strategy, right? Nobody wants to just build an exact clone of another game. But yeah, that's my sort of initial take. I'll start to do some scenario editing. Honestly, I might jump back into War No for a little while and wait for the developers to sort of bake this a little bit more. I expect probably in the next few weeks they'll have started to implement some of these features and maybe added some of the modding features, and then I think I'll jump in. Yeah, so that's it. And if if you're interested in sort of like exploring game engines and like modding these sort of modern real-time strategy, real-time tactical games, I have almost all of them, and I'm a computer science, AI guy professionally, so I'm actually thinking of maybe integrating some of that stuff into my videos in the future. But hit me up in the comments and tell me what you think about Broken Arrow, and if you think that the potential's there, what you think the developer should do. I think the developer probably will be seeing all these videos, not just me. I mean any video with their game, and so any kind of comment, critique that you give to me, they'll probably see, and I think that'll probably be helpful for them to improve and iterate. And I'm sure they'll get there, and I'm hoping for their success as well. So thanks everybody. Look to me to start publishing more of these videos, and yeah, I look forward to re-engaging with the community. Have a good one. Night.